Alfred Hitchcock and Edith Head are two people very significant to the history of filmmaking, but also to the art of collaboration. Alfred Hitchcock was a filmmaker responsible for popularizing the suspense genre of film. He began his career in the 1920s as a title card sketch artist working for the famous players Lasky in the silent era of filmmaking, and began to learn the power of image without dialogue. After the company closed, he went on to work in other areas of filmmaking. This period of working would contribute to some of the techniques he developed in his overall style. Edith Head was one of the most famous costume designers in Hollywood at this time. She was originally a teacher that taught languages, but started to take an art class and wanted to change her career. One day in 1924, where there was a job advertised for a sketch artist at the studio Paramount Pictures, she took a collection of drawings from the other students and got the job. Both Hitchcock and Head developed styles in which emphasis was placed on details in a frame or a scene of a film. As a result of this, Alfred Hitchcock developed the Hitchcockian technique of filmmaking, which would focus on building tension and suspense by emphasizing particular details in a scene, while Edith Head worked to use the psychology of the character and choices of the director to make the clothing for the characters. The Birds by Alfred Hitchcock explores the themes of love, violence, and secrets, all themes that lend themselves to the language of tension and suspense. It follows Melanie Daniels, played by Tippi Hedren, a society girl that falls in love with a lawyer and begins to play cat and mouse with him in attempts to gain his affections. What ensues is a series of events in which Melanie's past digressions in the eyes of the law and other secrets also come to light, yet what is intermingled with horrific bird attacks as a source of tension. How Head and Hitchcock collaborated to communicate these themes were to use the camera in a series of wide and close-up shots to tell the story, with the birds acting as objects of building towards tension or relieving the possibility of any secrets being found out. Edith Head famously designed a green dress and jacket for the actress Tippi Hedren playing Melanie. The spring green was a very deliberate choice, as it was the only shade of the green seen in the film compared with the relatively muted nature of the other characters. It symbolised abundance and fertility to match the confidence and independence of this young woman. Her red nails and blonde wig also made her stand out amongst others. Part of the reason for this emphasis on close-up and action was due to the time they were making films. Filmmaking was subject to something called the Hays Code at this time. Examples of the Hays Code included keeping Catholic and family values, no sexually explicit content, good guys always win and bad guys always lose. This affected their work greatly, as they could not be seen to encourage any behaviours or ethoses outside of this. However, Hitchcock developed his language of suspense in part reaction to these rules, as the themes of his films often explored the subjects of gender dynamics and sexual politics, or subverted these expectations. Head was also subject to this, as she could not be sexually explicit with any of the clothes that she made, nor could she be suggestive in any way of anything outside of these values. Her work was well made, well fitted, well dressed, and only ever suggestive of possible themes within these rules. Their styles complemented each other in their minimal approaches, and Edith Head's understanding of Hitchcock's intentions with his films allowed her freedom to style and choose the clothing that best fitted the nature of the characters. Because they understood each other so well, they never seemed to have any falling out that meant they didn't work together again, and they continued to remain close until they both passed away. It couldn't be looked upon as a happy coincidence in which two people that met and found their way just worked well because they understood each other's work intentions and valued what the others did to help facilitate great filmmaking. Their collaboration would last for 10 other films and remained significant to both of them, as they understood each other the ways that others could not. What their relationship demonstrates is how At certain times, you have to make certain choices in life on how you want to make art, yet somehow your similarities are the basis in which you can create great art. And collaboration is important in recognizing that connection and at times the time you are finding each other is a very important one. You can't necessarily define their relationship as one thing other than, well, possibly them being a costume designer and a film director, but you cannot deny that the impact of both of their work has been defining in the art of cinema. Tim Burton and Colleen Atwood are two individuals that have become a powerhouse of fantastical and original filmmaking. Tim Burton is an American filmmaker and animator that has developed a uniquely dark and gothic style. His films often tell stories of those that seem to be marginalized by the expectations and preconceived notions of society and are somehow shunned on the basis of being different by those that view them as lesser than what is socially acceptable. His films and animations can use the themes such as life and death, grief, loss, alienation, self-discovery, and growth as a familiar but unspoken language to the audience to help explore the character's internal world. He uses a fantastical setting, colourful styling, and a very saturated version of conventional settings to explore these notions of difference compared with normality, and has crafted a very dark but humorous and colourful style of communication through heightened elements of filmmaking. His filmmaking also demands an element of artistic license and imagination from those he continues to work and collaborate with. Tim Burton began filmmaking in reaction to quite a lonely and isolated childhood. He began by making a series of stop-motion films on a home video camera, began to draw weird and fantastical creatures, or created monstrous and cartoonish characters based on people he knew in his American neighborhood. He was socially awkward and didn't have many friends but because he was a great observer of others in his life and he felt like he was like other people, but the nature of how he was treated and saw the world made him feel as if he didn't belong. From high school, he went on to study at Cal Arts on a course run by the Disney Studios where he was learning how to be a sketch artist. While he was there, he felt the same alienation and isolation as before. The concept art he did for projects were never used, and he had very little to do with filmmaking. However, during this time, he did have the opportunity to make a number of short films, one of them being a precursor to his animation Frankenweenie. However, nothing came of it, and he was fired for wasting the company's time and resources and the film not encompassing the values of the company, which was to be family-based. However, again, upon being fired, he had gained a reputation and he began to make feature films, his first being Pee-wee's Big Adventure. It wasn't until the film Edward Scissorhands that he would meet one of his most regular collaborators, Colleen Atwood. Colleen Atwood originally wanted to be a fine artist, but due to a teenage pregnancy, she had to drop out of high school and find means of supporting herself. It was in her late 20s, after a series of jobs such as working at McDonald's and then other fashion-related jobs, she enrolled in a film class and therefrom started to work with future filmmakers and production designers. Her first job in a film was making prop hats for film called Ragtime, but her first full film credit as a costume designer was a film called A Little Sex. It was through meeting Tim Burton's production designer, Bo Welch, that he recommended her to Burton and she designed the clothing for Edward Scissorhands. Edward Scissorhands is one of the few films that truly encompasses and draws on some of these values and techniques Burton is well known for. Exploring Edward Scissorhands, we see that these rules he sticks to outside of trying to make what could seem quite mundane fantastical and vice versa. It is a film about a Frankenstein-esque style creature created by a mad scientist on a hill. He wasn't finished, and most visual differences is having scissors for hands. He then enters a neighbourhood of those that accept him for his talents for their entertainment and visual pleasure, but the short-sighted nature of their community and lack of deeper understanding cause him to be isolated and have to eventually leave after finding love and a sense of acceptance. He explores differences between the inhabitants and the lives they lead via colour and representation through a seemingly oversaturated colour palette and seems overly sunny in its nature. A lot of green, yellow and oranges and red to help reflect that this is a sunny neighbourhood in California, but somehow exaggerating the fact that everyone is hiding a short-sightedness or boredom or frustration and loneliness. The colourful clothing is offset by Edward's dark and pieced-together bodysuit, which often enters the neighbourhood gets covered with a suit to hide his differences, yet it is hard not to notice how different his hands are as they are all scissors. The clothing alone acts as the social commentary on denial and almost obscuring a certain reality through the oversaturated colour. Bo Welch, the production designer of Edward Scissorhands, has spoken about the style of the setting was about creating a real fantasy, how the colours of the neighbourhood, in contrast with the darker tones of Edward Scissorhands' Hill, was meant to hide a creative and sensitive person and obscure the vision of those that would come to know him in the neighbourhood. Bo Welch is also a key figure in recommending Colleen Atwood to Tim Burton, as they had previously worked together on certain film productions. Colleen Atwood's task as the costume designer was to use the colours of Bo Welch's production design to help build a world that also was grounded in the idea of fantasy, choosing colours that reflected the tones and hues used in the painting of the neighbourhood, but also finding clothes that somehow satirise the personalities of the characters living in the neighbourhood. Other challenges included making a bodysuit. At this time in history, there weren't many stretch fabrics existing, so Edward Scissorhands' bodysuit was made entirely of pieced-together leather, which was incredibly hard for Johnny Depp as he would leave the suit sweating between takes. While making Edward Scissorhands, Tim Burton would use the camera in a way of either using it as a point of view from the main character or to emphasise the lives of the other characters. He would use a variety of long shots or bird-eye view shots to view the neighbourhood as if Edward was viewing it. The point of view of the camera was to act as if the main protagonist was viewing it at certain times, or the characters of the neighbours were viewing Edward. The essence of Colleen Atwood and Tim Burton's collaboration on Edward Scissorhands has remained throughout the various projects they've done over the years. It being their sort of first feature film together just demonstrates that working together long term has the ability to build a sense of confidence and ability to experiment, to have very little fear when it comes to the idea of filmmaking, as it can be so controlled by others. And art is subjective, but creating art that is important to you and having people that can reflect back the essence of what you are trying to create really helps you build a sense of confidence and fearlessness when it comes to experimentation with types of filmmaking that you wish to do. What I've learned from these collaborators is that it is important to take faith in how you see the world and how you want to creatively exist if that is the way you wish to exist. It's important to understand that you as an individual have far more importance than you might think, but also you do need a team around you to help you understand and facilitate a creative language that helps you to visually articulate your vision for the world. I hope that this has been informative, and I wish
as Lydia's daughter Astrid.
This person was as opposed to the dull-colored mansion he's occupied all these years.